There's something deeply calming about watching a river gently merge into the sea. The water doesn't rush. It doesn't push or resist. It simply flows, carrying all that it has gathered along the way, past stones, storms, twists, and turns, until it reaches its destination. And what's most remarkable is how quietly it arrives, as though it always knew where it was meant to go, even without forcing the journey. This stillness, this effortless grace, is something Krishna speaks of in the Bhagavad Gita. There's one particular verse that captures this feeling in a way that lingers. A person who is not disturbed by the endless stream of desires, who remains steady like the ocean into which many rivers flow, attains peace. That's from chapter 2, verse 70. At first, it might just sound poetic. But the more life you live, the more challenges you face, the more this line begins to feel like a truth you can actually hold on to. Because let's be honest, most of us don't feel like vast oceans at all. Most days, we feel like small boats caught in a storm, being pulled in every direction. We chase what feels urgent, we react to whatever is happening around us, and we end up making decisions not from a place of calm, but from pressure. But Krishna never moved like that. He never allowed himself to be pushed by panic or pulled by temporary emotions. His actions were never rushed. He always moved with clarity, not just for the moment, but for the bigger picture. And that is exactly what made his choices so powerful. He didn't just react to what was unfolding in front of him. He understood where things were going. And if we can learn to think like that, to reflect before we respond, to see beyond the surface, we start to move from survival into something much more stable and meaningful. So maybe we need to return to the beginning. Back to that battlefield, where Krishna stood beside Arjuna, calm, steady, unwavering, even as everything around them prepared for war. What made Krishna so composed in a moment that would shake anyone? And more importantly, how can we find even a small piece of that steadiness in our own lives? Because when life feels loud and overwhelming, when everything seems urgent and uncertain, we need more than motivation. We need vision. We need to act not just for today, but with tomorrow in mind. We need to move with the end in mind. Let's walk that path slowly, piece by piece. Part 1. The War Before the War. Before a single arrow flew across the field of Kurukshetra, a much deeper war was already being fought, and it wasn't between kingdoms. It was inside Arjuna. Standing in his chariot, looking at his family on both sides of the battle, Arjuna couldn't hold himself together. His hands trembled, his voice cracked, and his heart felt completely torn apart. He didn't know what to do. He didn't even know who he was anymore. And Krishna, who sat quietly beside him, didn't rush to fix it. He didn't interrupt or try to offer quick comfort. He just stayed, steady and grounded, while Arjuna's mind collapsed under the weight of his emotions. Because Krishna knew something we often forget. Before you can win any battle outside, you have to face the one within. And that internal battle, the one between fear and clarity, between doubt and truth, is often the harder one. But here's the part that's easy to miss. Krishna didn't respond from emotion. He didn't get caught up in the moment. Instead, he offered a perspective that reached far beyond the present. He reminded Arjuna that this moment, as painful and heavy as it was, did not hold the full story. There were centuries of dharma behind him and generations of balance ahead of him. And if he could act from that place, from vision, not just emotion, then his choices would carry the strength to create real peace. That is what Krishna showed us. To act not just based on what feels difficult now, but from the peace we want to build later. That is what it means to move with the end in mind. It means looking beyond the noise of the present. It means asking not, what feels good right now, but, what kind of life am I shaping, one action at a time? When Krishna told Arjuna to fight, it wasn't because he celebrated war. It was because he saw what needed to be protected: justice, fairness, dignity, and truth. He wasn't reacting out of anger. He was choosing from resolve. And that one shift changes everything. Because when your life is guided by vision, even your smallest actions begin to build something much larger. But staying anchored like that is not easy. Because the present is loud, while the future is quiet. Desires scream, but duty speaks in a softer voice. And in that silence, we meet the next part of Krishna's teaching. Part 2. The River and the Ocean. There is a line in the Gita that reads almost like a prayer. Just as the ocean remains full and undisturbed, even as rivers keep flowing into it, a person who stays unmoved by desires finds peace. That's also from chapter 2, verse 70. At first glance, it may sound like Krishna is asking us to disconnect completely, to stop feeling desire, to become distant or detached. But when you look deeper, there is something much more nuanced. The ocean doesn't reject the rivers. It allows them in. It receives all that comes its way, the calm waters and the turbulent ones, but it doesn't lose itself in them. That is the real insight. You don't need to erase your desires. You don't have to deny your emotions. You just have to stop letting them rule every decision. Because if every passing thought becomes your guide, if every emotion becomes your direction, you will keep starting and stopping, building and breaking, never feeling settled. You'll run after one idea today, then abandon it tomorrow. You'll take action from fear this week, then spend next week fixing what fear created. That's not peace. That's confusion. But if you can become like the ocean, if you can welcome your emotions, understand them, and still stay rooted in what really matters, your life begins to take on a different kind of depth. You stop reacting from anxiety. You stop explaining yourself to be understood. You stop saying yes just to please others. And you begin to ask a new kind of question, one that cuts through the noise. Will this still matter to me 5 years from now? That's the shift. Not what's trending, not what looks good, but what feels grounded, what feels true beyond the moment. That's how Krishna moved. He wasn't shaken by the waves around him because his clarity came from something deeper, something that didn't change with circumstances. And that's where true leadership begins. Not from control over others, but from clarity within yourself. Which brings us to the last piece of this journey. Part 3. Living with the end in mind. It's one thing to speak about clarity when everything is peaceful. But what about when things fall apart? When someone misjudges you? When you are left out? When a plan fails? When your heart is tired and your mind is restless? That's when the teachings of Krishna matter most. Because he wasn't only calm when things were quiet. He stayed grounded when everything around him was on fire. He had the power to destroy his enemies, but he didn't. He could have made choices from emotion, but he didn't. He chose to stay aligned with Dharma. Not just what felt satisfying now, but what would create goodness over time. So how do we do the same? We begin with the small moments, the moments that don't look spiritual, but actually shape everything. Before replying to a message, Pause and ask yourself if you are speaking from ego or understanding. Before committing to something out of guilt, take a breath and ask if your heart is truly behind it. Before running after something just because others are doing it, pause and ask why. And most importantly, ask yourself, will this matter to me at the end of the story? That one question can shift your direction. Because when you live from vision instead of impulse, you stop wasting energy on things that don't build anything real. You stop chasing validation. You stop fighting battles that don't need to be fought. And you start creating something slower, but much stronger. You begin to return to yourself. Not the version of you that is always reacting, always rushing, always trying to prove something. But the version that moves like Krishna, calm, clear, and deeply rooted in what truly matters. The version of you that can see beyond the moment and lead from that place. Closing. So wherever you are right now, whether you are standing in the middle of chaos or quietly finding your strength again, try to remember this. The river always reaches the ocean. You don't have to rush. You don't have to force anything. But you do need to see clearly. Because the ones who live with peace are not the ones who have never faced storms. They are the ones who learned how to keep sailing by following stars that don't move. And Krishna's clarity, that calm beyond the confusion, is one of those stars. So before you take your next step, before you choose a direction or make a decision, just ask yourself one gentle question. Will this still feel right at the end? And if the answer is yes, then take that step. Slowly, steadily, with clarity in your heart. Because that is how you move beyond reaction. That is how you become the one who leads. And that is how you begin to live like Krishna, with peace not just in your thoughts, but in your choices. With the end in mind.